Hello everyone.
About 70% of the friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did.
I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Story 1. It was a quiet Friday evening, the kind that was perfect for relaxing after a long week. I had planned to spend the night in, binge watching a new series and enjoying some much-needed solitude. My house was peaceful, the only sounds being the occasional creak of the floorboards and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I was curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, when I heard footsteps. They were soft but distinct, coming from above. My heart skipped a beat. At first I tried to convince myself it was just the house settling. The old place had a way of making strange noises, especially when the temperature dropped. But as the footsteps grew louder and more deliberate, I knew this was something different. I stood up, my heart pounding, and looked around the room. The house was dark and silent, save for the unsettling noise from the attic. The attic door was in the hallway, at the end of a narrow staircase. I had always avoided the attic. It was an old, dusty space cluttered with forgotten items. I'd never had any reason to go up there, and the thought of exploring it now, in the dead of night, made my skin crawl. Nevertheless, I needed to investigate. I grabbed a flashlight from a drawer and slowly made my way to the hallway. The attic door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible beyond. I hesitated, my hand trembling as I reached for the door. I took a deep breath and pushed it open, the old hinges creaking in protest. I shone the flashlight up the stairs, trying to pierce through the darkness that seemed to envelop the attic. The steps seemed to stretch on forever as I climbed, each creak echoing in the quiet house. My flashlight's beam wavered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. When I reached the top, I paused, listening intently. The footsteps had stopped, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake. I turned on the attic light and slowly opened the door. The attic was dimly lit, with beams of dusty light filtering through the small window. My eyes quickly scanned the room, taking in the stacks of old boxes, forgotten furniture, and cobwebs hanging from every corner. The atmosphere was thick with dust and disuse. My flashlight swept across the room, revealing a figure huddled in the far corner. It was a man disheveled, with wild eyes and a tattered coat. He looked as surprised to see me as I was to see him. For a moment, neither of us moved. The man's eyes darted around the attic as if looking for an escape route. I froze, unsure of what to do. The sight of the intruder was so unexpected that my mind was struggling to process it. The man seemed to realize the same and scrambled to his feet. Panic etched on his face, he bolted for the far end of the attic. My instincts kicked in and I quickly called the police, whispering into the phone to avoid alerting him. I stayed at the entrance, trying to keep my eyes on him as best I could while waiting for the authorities. The intruder had started rummaging through the boxes, frantically throwing things aside as if searching for something. He looked like he was losing control, and the mess he was making was only adding to the chaos. Minutes felt like hours as I listened to the man's movements, his breathing heavy and erratic. The attic was filled with the sounds of crashing boxes and muffled curses. I kept the flashlight trained on him, trying to stay as calm as possible. The beam occasionally caught glimpses of his gaunt face and the disarray of the attic. Finally, I heard the distant wail of sirens. Relief washed over me, but I knew I had to stay alert until the police arrived. I could hear their footsteps as they climbed the stairs, and soon they were at the attic door. I stepped aside as they entered, their flashlights cutting through the dimness. The intruder was quickly subdued by the officers, who moved with practiced efficiency. They questioned him briefly before leading him away in handcuffs. I was shaken but grateful to see the situation resolved. The officers reassured me that the man would be taken into custody and that I was safe. After the police left, I took a closer look at the attic. It became clear that the intruder had been living there for days. There were makeshift bedding arrangements and empty food wrappers scattered around. It was unsettling to think that someone had been so close, hiding in the very space I had avoided for so long. The ordeal left me deeply unsettled, and I found myself reflecting on the experience long after the event. I took extra precautions to secure my home, installing additional locks and reinforcing the attic door. It was a stark reminder of how vulnerable even the safest places could be. In the weeks that followed, I worked on regaining a sense of normalcy. I resumed my routine, but the eerie presence of the attic remained with me. The once ignored space had become a constant reminder of how close I had come to a potentially dangerous situation. I learned to be more vigilant and to trust my instincts, no matter how improbable the threat might seem. The experience also gave me a new perspective on the importance of home security and the need to be prepared for unexpected situations. I shared my story with friends and family, emphasizing the importance of knowing and securing every part of one's home, even the most overlooked areas. The memory of that night stayed with me, a haunting reminder of how easily our sense of safety can be shattered. Story 2. It was a chilly autumn morning when I woke up, feeling refreshed after a good night's sleep. I stretched and prepared for my usual routine, but as I walked to the kitchen, something felt off. The first sign was the draft of cold air brushing against my face. I looked towards the front door and noticed it was slightly ajar. My heart sank. I distinctly remembered locking it the night before. I approached the door cautiously, peering through the crack. The door was indeed unlocked, but nothing appeared out of place in the hallway. I hesitated for a moment before pushing it fully open and stepping outside. My neighborhood was calm and quiet, the early morning stillness punctuated only by the distant chirping of birds. My immediate thought was that perhaps the door hadn't latched properly. However, the fact that it was ajar and the nagging feeling of unease made me think otherwise. I quickly returned inside, locked the door securely, and decided to review the security footage from the previous night. I hoped it would provide some clarity or at least a reassurance that nothing serious had happened. I sat down at my computer and accessed the footage from the security camera positioned near the front door. The screen flickered as it loaded the night's recordings. The timestamp indicated the footage was from around 3 a.m. I watched intently, my anxiety growing with each passing second. The footage revealed a dark figure approaching my front door. The person moved stealthily, staying close to the shadows. They seemed to be wearing a hoodie, obscuring their face. My pulse quickened as I watched them pull out a set of tools and begin working on the lock. The figure was methodical and deliberate, working with a practiced hand. They seemed to know exactly what they were doing. The sight of them fiddling with the lock filled me with a growing sense of dread. I saw them pause occasionally, glancing around to ensure they weren't being watched. The entire process lasted for about 15 minutes, and it was clear that the figure was trying to gain entry. At one point, the person looked directly at the camera, their face still hidden by the hoodie. It was unsettling to think that they were aware of the surveillance but continued their attempts anyway. Eventually, they managed to open the door slightly, but they didn't appear to enter. Instead, they stepped back, checked their surroundings one more time, and then disappeared into the night. The footage ended, and I sat there in shock. The reality of the attempted break-in hit me hard. I knew I had to take action. I immediately called the police, providing them with the footage and a detailed account of what had happened. They assured me that they would send an officer to investigate and that they would be in touch with any updates. While waiting for the police, I took some precautions to ensure my safety. I checked all the locks and windows in the house, making sure everything was secure. I also set up additional temporary security measures, including a few extra motion sensor lights around the property. My hands trembled as I worked, and I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability that had settled over me. When the police arrived, they reviewed the footage and took notes. The officer asked questions about any potential suspects or previous incidents, but I had no leads. The investigation was launched, but the lack of clear identification made it challenging to track down the individual. They advised me to stay vigilant and report any further suspicious activity immediately. In the following days, I felt on edge. Every creak of the house or unexpected noise made me jump. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings and took extra precautions when leaving and returning home. The experience had left me feeling uneasy, and I found it difficult to relax in my own space. The police continued their investigation, but the trail went cold. Despite their efforts, they were unable to identify the figure or determine their intentions. The case remained open, and I was left to grapple with the aftermath of the attempted break-in. I decided to invest in a more comprehensive security system, including upgraded cameras and a smart lock. The new system provided me with a greater sense of security and control. I also reached out to my neighbors to inform them of the incident and encourage them to be vigilant. Gradually, the fear and anxiety subsided, replaced by a renewed sense of vigilance and preparedness. I realized that while the attempted break-in was a frightening experience, it also highlighted the importance of taking proactive steps to protect oneself. The incident had taught me to be more aware of my surroundings and to take security seriously. Though the sense of invasion never fully disappeared, I learned to live with it. I continued to maintain a high level of security and stayed connected with my local community. The experience had been a stark reminder of the realities of personal safety and the importance of being prepared for the unexpected. In time, I adapted to the new normal and found solace in the measures I had taken to safeguard my home. The experience had been unsettling, but it ultimately strengthened my resolve to protect myself and my property. Story 3. It was a routine evening, and I was finishing up a quiet night at home. The rain pattered softly against the window as I relaxed on the couch, catching up on some reading. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, drawing my attention. When I glanced at the screen, my heart skipped a beat. The caller ID displayed my own number. At first, I thought it was a glitch or some kind of prank call. It wasn't unusual to receive odd or wrong number calls, but this was different. My own number appearing on the screen felt deeply unsettling. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to answer, curiosity overcoming my initial hesitation. Hello, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The only response was silence. I could hear the faint sound of heavy breathing on the other end, but no words. My heart raced as I waited, hoping for a response or an explanation. The breathing continued, slow and rhythmic, like someone was holding the phone up to their mouth but wasn't speaking. Hello? Is someone there? I asked again, but there was no answer. The heavy breathing continued, and I could feel the unease creeping up my spine. I ended the call, my hand trembling slightly. The eerie silence and heavy breathing left me feeling unsettled. I immediately tried calling back, but the call went straight to voicemail. I wondered if it was a technical issue or perhaps someone playing a cruel joke. I brushed it off, trying to convince myself it was nothing to worry about. However, the call had left me feeling on edge. The next day, the incident lingered in my mind. I found myself checking my phone more frequently, half expecting to see my own number on the caller ID end. I also noticed that the call had been made at precisely 8:47 p.m., a time I had been home alone. I decided to inform the police, just in case. Officer Lewis, who took my report, listened intently. He assured me that it was good to be cautious and advised me to keep an eye out for any unusual activity. He noted down the details of the call and suggested I check my phone's call logs for any other suspicious activity. The days passed, but the strange call remained in the back of my mind. I began to feel a heightened sense of paranoia, especially when I was alone. Every time my phone rang, I felt a twinge of anxiety. The idea that someone had called me from my own number and remained silent was haunting. Then, a week later, I received another call from my own number. My heart raced as I hesitated, but the fear of not knowing what might be on the other end made me answer. This time, the silence was even more oppressive. The heavy breathing was accompanied by what sounded like faint shuffling noises, as if someone was moving around or shifting their weight. I couldn't make out any clear sounds or voices. I ended the call quickly and immediately contacted Officer Lewis. He arranged for a more thorough investigation. The police began examining the call records and tracking any unusual activity associated with my phone number. They also advised me to be extra vigilant and to document any further incidents. As the investigation progressed, I became increasingly anxious. I started noticing other small, unsettling things, mysterious knocks on my door at odd hours, strange noises outside my window, and a growing sense of being watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was monitoring my every move. A week after the second call, things took a more disturbing turn. I was sitting at my desk working late into the night when I received yet another call from my own number. My heart pounded as I answered, half expecting the same eerie silence. Instead, I heard a distorted voice, muffled and garbled, trying to speak, but the words were unintelligible. I managed to record a portion of the call before it ended abruptly. The next day, I provided the recording to Officer Lewis. He reviewed it with his team and noted that the distorted voice could be indicative of someone using a voice-altering device to mask their identity. The investigation was becoming more complex, but they were determined to find answers. In the meantime, I took additional measures to protect myself. I installed security cameras around my home and began keeping a detailed log of any unusual occurrences. I also started taking different routes when I went out and made sure to vary my daily routine to avoid predictability. The police continued their investigation, tracking the source of the calls and analyzing the recorded audio. They traced the calls to a location nearby but faced challenges in pinpointing the exact individual responsible. The case was frustratingly elusive, and the lack of concrete leads made it difficult to make significant progress. One evening, as I reviewed my security camera footage, I noticed something alarming. A shadowy figure had been lingering outside my home at various times, sometimes appearing just before or after the strange calls. The figure was never clearly visible, and their movements were erratic. I shared the footage with Officer Lewis, who agreed that it was a crucial lead. The police increased their patrols in the area and conducted interviews with neighbors to see if anyone had noticed suspicious activity. The investigation intensified, but the identity of the caller remained a mystery. Despite the heightened security and vigilance, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. The case eventually grew cold, with no concrete leads or suspects identified. While the police assured me they would continue to monitor any new developments, the fear and unease lingered. The experience had profoundly impacted my sense of security, leaving me with a heightened awareness of the potential dangers that lurk in the shadows. In the end, the calls from my own number became a chilling reminder of how technology can be used to invade personal privacy and instill fear. The silence and heavy breathing on the other end of the line were more than just unsettling, they were a stark reminder of the vulnerability we face in an increasingly connected world. Story 4. It was a crisp autumn evening when I first noticed that something was amiss. I had spent the day running errands and catching up with work, and by the time I returned home, the sun had dipped below the horizon. I parked my car in the driveway, grabbed my bags, and unlocked the front door with a casual twist of the key. As I stepped inside, a chill ran down my spine. The house felt different, strange, and unsettling. I shrugged it off as the result of a long day, but the eerie feeling persisted. I set my bags down in the foyer and noticed the faint scent of something metallic in the air. Puzzled, I walked through the house, flicking on lights as I went. Everything seemed in place until I reached my home office. There I found the first disturbing sign. A note was placed prominently on my desk. It was handwritten in a neat but eerie script. I saw you were late today. Traffic can be unpredictable. Make sure you're careful. My blood ran cold as I read the note. The message was oddly specific, referencing my arrival time at home and suggesting that someone had been watching me. I frantically looked around the room for any other signs of intrusion, but everything appeared as it should be. The note was the only anomaly, but it was enough to send me into a panic. I called the police immediately, but they advised me to wait for them to arrive and not to touch anything in the meantime. I tried to stay calm, but every creak of the house seemed amplified. Every shadow felt threatening. My mind raced with questions: who had broken in? How did they know my routines? While waiting for the police, I decided to check the rest of the house. I found another note in the kitchen, tucked inside the fruit bowl. You like your coffee strong in the morning. It's a good way to start the day. Just make sure you don't miss your next meeting. This note was even more unsettling. It not only referenced my morning routine, but also hinted at my work schedule. I felt a growing sense of dread. Whoever had done this had been following me closely, or at least knew a great deal about my daily habits. The police arrived shortly thereafter and conducted a thorough investigation. They checked for signs of forced entry, fingerprints, or anything that might indicate who had been in the house. They found nothing to suggest a break-in, no broken locks, no tampered windows. The security system, which I had always trusted, had not triggered any alarms. It was as if the intruder had walked in through a door left ajar, which was impossible as I had double-checked everything before leaving. The officers took the notes into evidence and promised to increase patrols around my neighborhood. They suggested that I change my locks and consider installing additional security measures. Despite their reassurances, I felt a gnawing unease. The intrusion had not only violated my home but also invaded my sense of safety. That night I barely slept. I kept imagining the intruder lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The thought of someone having access to my home and my personal information was terrifying. I replayed the events of the day, trying to identify any moments when I might have been followed or observed, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The next morning I decided to take action. I called a locksmith to change all the locks and installed a more sophisticated security system with cameras. I also set up a security code that only I knew, hoping that it would deter any further attempts to breach my home. Despite these precautions, the fear remained. I found myself constantly on edge, scrutinizing every detail of my surroundings. I avoided going out alone whenever possible and became hyper-aware of my routines. Every time my phone rang or I heard a knock on the door, my heart skipped a beat. A few days later, another note arrived. This time, it was left on my car windshield. I see you're being extra cautious. Good. It's always wise to be aware of your surroundings. But remember, it's only a matter of time before you slip up. The message was a chilling reminder that the person behind these notes was still watching, still waiting for a moment of vulnerability. I contacted the police again, and they reassured me that they were doing everything they could. They advised me to be cautious and to report any further suspicious activity. Over time, I began to adapt to my new reality. I learned to manage my fear and to live with a heightened sense of awareness. The notes eventually stopped coming, but the anxiety lingered. I continued to be vigilant, always checking my surroundings and ensuring that my home remained secure. The incident had a profound impact on me. It served as a stark reminder of how fragile our sense of safety can be and the lengths to which some people will go to invade that safety. The experience also reinforced the importance of taking proactive steps to protect oneself and one's home. Months later, I still occasionally feel a twinge of unease when I hear a strange noise or notice a change in my routine. However, I've learned to manage these feelings and to trust in the security measures I've put in place. The experience taught me the importance of resilience and the value of maintaining a sense of control, even in the face of fear. In the end, while the notes and the intrusion were harrowing, they also galvanized me to take charge of my personal security and to remain vigilant. The ordeal was a reminder of the importance of staying prepared and aware in an unpredictable world. Story 5. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I returned home from a weekend getaway. I had been looking forward to the comfort of my own space after a few days away, relishing the idea of curling up with a good book and a hot cup of tea. As I pulled into my driveway, something immediately struck me as odd. My car, a silver sedan I'd parked meticulously in the middle of the driveway, was now angled awkwardly, its front end jutting slightly towards the street. A shiver of unease ran down my spine. I couldn't recall parking it like that, and it was unnerving to see my vehicle displaced from its usual spot. I parked my car and stepped out, my gaze fixed on the disheveled state of my sedan. I approached it, heart pounding, and noticed that the driver's side door was slightly ajar. The lock was still intact, but the fact that the door was open was deeply unsettling. I hesitated before opening the door wider and peering inside. The interior was in disarray. My glove compartment was open, its contents strewn about haphazardly. Papers, pens, and old receipts were scattered across the seats and floor. I noticed that my center console had been rummaged through as well. My compact flashlight, a pair of sunglasses, and other personal items were missing or out of place. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered promptly, and I explained the situation, expressing my concern that someone had tampered with my car. They assured me that a patrol unit would be dispatched to my location to investigate the potential break-in. While I waited, I surveyed the area around my car. The driveway was secluded, with tall hedges and a few overgrown bushes. There were no signs of forced entry into the house itself, which was a small comfort, but the fact that my car had been tampered with was deeply disconcerting. I began to wonder if this was an isolated incident or if there was a more sinister motive behind it. The police arrived within 20 minutes, and I guided them through the scene. They took detailed notes and photographs of the car and its contents, searching for any fingerprints or other evidence that might indicate who had been there. One of the officers asked if anything valuable was missing or if there had been any signs of forced entry into the house. I shook my head, noting that while some items were out of place, nothing seemed to be stolen. The officers reassured me that they would investigate and keep an eye on the area, but they didn't seem optimistic about finding the culprit without more concrete evidence. I understood their position, but the feeling of violation lingered heavily. Once the officers left, I was left with an unsettling sense of vulnerability. I checked the interior of my car again, trying to organize the mess and ascertain if anything was missing. A few small items were indeed gone, including a portable charger and a small stash of loose change. I also found that my car's registration and insurance documents had been moved, but they seemed to be intact. The days following the incident were tense. I kept my car parked in the garage and made sure to lock all doors and windows tightly when I left the house. I also started to notice subtle changes in my routine, small things that seemed out of place, like the way some items in my home were slightly shifted or rearranged. It was as though someone had been paying close attention to my habits and using that knowledge to intrude upon my personal space. A week later, I received a phone call from the police. They informed me that they had reviewed nearby security footage and had seen a suspicious figure lingering around the area on the day of the incident. The footage was grainy, but they managed to capture the silhouette of a person near my driveway. The officer on the phone mentioned that they were continuing to investigate but needed any additional information I could provide. I felt a mix of relief and frustration. At least there was a lead, but the slow pace of the investigation was disheartening. I took additional precautions, installing motion sensor lights around my property and setting up a small security camera system to monitor the driveway and surrounding area. In the weeks that followed, there were no further incidents, but the sense of unease lingered. I was always on edge, checking and rechecking the locks on my doors and the state of my car. I also reached out to my neighbors, informing them of the incident and asking them to be vigilant. It was comforting to know that they were on alert, but the incident had taken a toll on my peace of mind. Eventually, the investigation did not yield any new leads, and the case was closed due to lack of evidence. Though the police assured me that they would reopen the case if new information came to light, I was left to grapple with the aftermath of the intrusion. The experience was a harsh reminder of the vulnerability that comes with modern living. It highlighted the importance of vigilance and the need to take proactive measures to safeguard personal property and privacy. While the incident left me feeling exposed and anxious, it also reinforced my resolve to be cautious and prepared. Despite the lingering sense of unease, I gradually adjusted to a new normal, finding ways to regain my sense of security. The memory of that autumn afternoon remained with me, a stark reminder of how quickly a routine day can be disrupted by unexpected and unsettling events. Story 6. The night was unseasonably warm for late October, and I had left the windows open to let in a breeze that was supposed to bring some relief from the lingering summer heat. I was nestled comfortably in my living room, curled up with a book, when I first heard a soft, shuffling noise coming from the basement. It was strange because the basement had been quiet for months. I used it mostly for storage, and aside from occasional trips down to retrieve holiday decorations or seasonal clothing, it was an area I rarely frequented. The sound was faint but persistent, like someone dragging something across the concrete floor. My initial thought was that it could be a small animal, perhaps a raccoon or a stray cat that had found its way in, but as the noise continued, I began to feel uneasy. The creeping sensation of being watched started to settle in, and my curiosity soon turned to concern. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but the noise grew louder, more deliberate. I decided to investigate, grabbing a flashlight from a drawer and making my way to the basement door. The old wooden steps creaked under my weight as I descended into the dimly lit space. The basement was illuminated only by a single, flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. Its feeble light cast long, unsettling shadows against the walls. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I noticed a few items had been moved around. A box that had been neatly stacked was now tipped over, its contents strewn across the floor. The noise seemed to have stopped, leaving an eerie silence that was even more unnerving. I took a cautious step forward, scanning the room with my flashlight. Suddenly, I heard a distinct thud coming from the far corner of the basement. My flashlight beam wavered, and I nearly dropped it in surprise. I braced myself, mentally preparing for whatever was in the basement with me. I edged closer, my heart pounding in my chest, until I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the corner of the basement, partially obscured by old furniture and clutter, was a makeshift hideout. A small, dark space had been carved out behind a stack of boxes and an old wardrobe. Inside the hideout, I could see a few personal items that did not belong to me: clothing, a blanket, and a small, dirty pillow. It was clear that someone had been living here. I was frozen in shock and fear. The realization that someone had been using my basement as a hideout without my knowledge was terrifying. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what had happened. Who could have been down here, and for how long? I turned quickly and started to ascend the stairs, deciding that the best course of action was to get out of the house and call the police. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps following me. My heart nearly stopped as I realized someone was still down there. I bolted through the kitchen, grabbing my phone from the counter and rushing outside to the front yard. I dialed 911 and reported the situation, explaining that I had heard noises from my basement and discovered a hideout that did not belong to me. The dispatcher assured me that officers were on their way and advised me to stay outside and keep a safe distance from the house. Within minutes, the police arrived and began their investigation. They cautiously entered the house and made their way to the basement. I watched anxiously from the front yard, feeling both relieved and apprehensive. The officers emerged after a short while, informing me that they had searched the basement and found signs of recent occupation. However, there was no one in the basement at the time of their search. The officers took statements and examined the area, noting the hidden space and the personal items. They explained that it was possible the intruder had left shortly before I discovered the hideout. They also advised me to be vigilant and to have my home checked for any additional signs of tampering or security breaches. The thought of someone having been in my home, even temporarily, was deeply unsettling. I felt violated and anxious, constantly looking over my shoulder and locking every door and window with an added sense of urgency. The police recommended that I improve my home security to prevent future incidents. They also suggested installing security cameras and ensuring all entry points were secure. In the following days, I took their advice to heart. I hired a security company to upgrade my home's security system, adding cameras and motion sensors to cover all possible entry points. I also checked the entire house for any additional signs of tampering, making sure that my home was as secure as possible. The experience left me with a heightened sense of awareness and unease. I struggled to shake off the feeling that someone had been lurking in the shadows of my home, using it as a temporary refuge. It was a disturbing reminder of how vulnerable one can be, even in the supposed safety of their own space. The investigation did not lead to the apprehension of the intruder, and I never learned who had been using my basement or why. The case remained unresolved, but the lessons learned from the incident shaped my approach to home security and personal safety. The sense of security I once took for granted was replaced by a cautious vigilance. I became more aware of the need to protect my personal space and to be proactive in safeguarding my home. Despite the unsettling experience, I worked to reclaim my sense of safety and normalcy, knowing that I had taken the necessary steps to prevent future breaches. The memory of that night remained a stark reminder of the fragility of security and the importance of remaining vigilant in an unpredictable world. Story 7. It was an ordinary Wednesday afternoon when the package arrived. I was lounging in the living room, catching up on some reading, when I heard the familiar sound of the mail slot. I went to check the mail, expecting just bills and junk mail, but this time, there was a small, unmarked package. The brown wrapping paper was plain, with no return address or identifying labels. Curiosity piqued. I took the package to the kitchen and carefully peeled off the wrapping. Inside was a single envelope and a small brass key. The key was ordinary in appearance, but the envelope was anything but. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, a growing sense of unease settling over me. Inside the envelope was a note, written in neat, but unsettlingly precise handwriting. It read, "I know where you live." My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the words, the message sinking in. I was home alone, having taken a rare day off work to relax, and the thought that someone knew where I lived and had access to my home was terrifying. I examined the key closely, trying to discern if it was for my house. The key had a simple design, with no specific markings or unique features. I went to my front door and tried the key in the lock. It fit perfectly, turning with a reassuring click. My breath caught in my throat. Whoever had sent this knew exactly which key would work. I quickly locked the door again and called the police, reporting the strange package and the note. The dispatcher assured me that they would send an officer to investigate, but the urgency in their voice was not reassuring. The idea of someone having the ability to enter my home while I was there alone was profoundly disturbing. As I waited for the police, I tried to keep myself calm. I walked around the house, checking all the windows and doors to ensure they were securely locked. I didn't see any signs of tampering, but the knowledge that someone had a key to my house made me feel increasingly vulnerable. The police arrived within the hour and conducted a thorough search of the property. They took the package and the note for further analysis, checking for fingerprints or any other evidence that might lead them to the sender. The officer reassured me that they would investigate the matter seriously and would keep me updated. After the police left, I felt an uneasy sense of paranoia. I kept the lights on and stayed in the most visible areas of the house, trying to keep my nerves steady. I made a point to call a friend and ask them to stay on the phone with me for a while, just to have some company and a sense of safety. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and vigilance. I stayed alert, checking every noise and movement with heightened suspicion. I continued to receive calls and messages from the police, but they had not yet identified any leads or suspects. The key in the note had not provided any new clues, and the lack of progress only added to my sense of dread. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I heard a faint noise coming from the back of the house. My heart pounded as I crept towards the sound, but when I checked, there was nothing out of the ordinary. The house was quiet and still, but the incident left me shaken. The police had advised me to take extra precautions, so I installed a more advanced security system, complete with cameras and motion detectors. I also hired a locksmith to rekey all the locks in my house, ensuring that the key sent to me would no longer work. Despite these measures, the sense of violation lingered, and I found it difficult to relax. Weeks passed, and the investigation seemed to stall. The police had no new information, and I began to feel the strain of the ongoing uncertainty. I tried to continue with my daily life, but the fear of another intrusion was always in the back of my mind. I avoided being home alone whenever possible, relying on friends and family to keep me company. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the living room, there was a knock at the door. My heart raced as I peered through the peephole, but I didn't see anyone. Hesitantly, I opened the door and found a package on the doorstep. It was similar to the first one, unmarked and plain. I picked it up with trembling hands and brought it inside. Look, inside the package was another note, but this one was different. It read, "You can lock your doors, but you can't lock your mind." The message was more cryptic and unsettling than the first. I felt a wave of dread as I realized that the sender was still out there, taunting me with their psychological games. I immediately called the police again and reported the new package. They took the note for analysis and promised to intensify their efforts to find the person responsible. The fear of an unknown threat had become an unwelcome companion, and I struggled to find comfort in my own home. As time went on, I began to adjust to the new reality of heightened security and constant vigilance. The fear of the unknown gradually became a part of my daily life, and I learned to live with the unease that accompanied it. I continued to stay in touch with the police, hoping for any updates or progress in the investigation. The experience had left an indelible mark on me. I had learned to appreciate the importance of security and the need to remain vigilant in the face of uncertainty. The ordeal had tested my resilience and had taught me the importance of seeking support from others during difficult times. Although the immediate threat had diminished and the police investigation continued, the psychological impact of the experience remained. It was a constant reminder of the vulnerability that can lurk beneath the surface of everyday life. Despite the fear and anxiety, I faced each day with a renewed sense of determination, knowing that I had taken every possible step to protect myself and my home. Story 8. I had always taken pride in my home, maintaining a sense of security and order. That's why it was so jarring to discover something was amiss one afternoon when I returned from a routine grocery run. As I unloaded the bags in my kitchen, I noticed odd items scattered around the countertops: a worn-out book with a cover I didn't recognize, a half-empty coffee cup with a lipstick stain, and a set of keys that didn't belong to me. A chill ran down my spine. I knew these items hadn't been there when I left. My first thought was to check the security footage I had installed after a series of minor break-ins in the neighborhood. I felt a pang of anxiety as I navigated to the security feed on my computer. The footage provided a clear view of my kitchen, and I hoped it would offer some answers. The timestamps on the footage showed that someone had entered my home while I was out. I watched with increasing dread as the stranger appeared in the frame. The person was wearing a dark hoodie and a mask, making it impossible to see their face. They moved methodically through my kitchen, as if they were familiar with the layout. My heart raced as I saw them open my pantry and inspect its contents. They rifled through my drawers and cabinets with a disturbing nonchalance, as if they were looking for something specific. The way they handled my belongings carefully and deliberately was unsettling. It was clear they weren't just randomly searching, they had a purpose. The footage showed the intruder making several trips back and forth between my kitchen and the outside. Each time they carried different items. They seemed to be bringing things in, not just taking them out. It was as if they were using my home as a temporary base for something. I fast-forwarded through the footage to see how long they had been there. To my horror, they had spent nearly 2 hours inside my home. They left around noon, just before I returned. I could barely contain my anxiety as I reviewed the footage again, hoping for some clue as to why they had invaded my space. I felt a pang of fear mixed with frustration. I immediately called the police and reported the break-in, providing them with the security footage. The officers arrived promptly and reviewed the evidence. They assured me they would investigate, but admitted that without a clear identity of the intruder, it would be challenging to track them down. As the police began their investigation, I found myself growing increasingly paranoid. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched or that the intruder might return. I kept checking my security system, even though I knew it wouldn't stop them if they had a key. My anxiety was compounded by the peculiar items left behind. I examined the book more closely. It was a worn, leather-bound volume with no title on the cover. Inside, the pages were filled with handwritten notes in a scrawling, unfamiliar script. I couldn't make sense of any of it, but the cryptic nature of the writing only heightened my unease. The set of keys was another mystery. They were old and rusty, clearly not used recently. I had no idea where they could belong. I considered calling a locksmith to change my locks, but the sense of violation was profound. Someone had been in my personal space, and I felt a deep, unsettling invasion. The lipstick-stained coffee cup was perhaps the most disturbing. I didn't recognize the shade of lipstick, and the thought that someone had sat in my kitchen, using my belongings, made my skin crawl. I wondered if the intruder had been watching me, or if they had some connection to my life. As days passed, the police investigation yielded little progress. The intruder remained unidentified, and the clues left behind were frustratingly vague. I took steps to enhance my home's security, installing additional cameras and alarms and changing the locks. I also made sure to be more cautious about leaving my home unattended. Despite these measures, the feeling of intrusion lingered. I was constantly on edge, unable to fully relax in my own home. The eerie sense that someone had been so close, examining my life and belongings, was deeply unsettling. I found myself avoiding going out unless absolutely necessary, and I took every precaution to ensure my safety. One evening, while I was organizing my belongings, I found another disturbing clue. Tucked away in a drawer was a small note with a message written in the same scrawling script as the book. The note simply read, "We are closer than you think." The note's appearance was the final straw. I was overwhelmed by a mix of fear and anger. I reached out to a private investigator for help, hoping they could provide some insight into the mystery that had disrupted my life. The investigator, a seasoned professional named Alex, reviewed the evidence and took a particular interest in the cryptic writing. Alex's investigation revealed that the script on the note and in the book was an obscure code used by a local group involved in covert operations. The group's motives were unclear, but it seemed they had been using abandoned or unoccupied homes as temporary bases. The keys, the book, and other items appeared to be part of their operations. While the private investigator worked on uncovering more information about the group, I found solace in regaining control over my home. The heightened security measures and the new understanding of the situation gave me a sense of empowerment. Though the mystery was far from resolved, I felt a renewed sense of vigilance and resilience. The experience had fundamentally changed me. I learned the importance of not only securing my home but also staying vigilant and proactive in the face of uncertainty. The intrusion was a harsh reminder of the fragility of personal safety, but it also underscored the strength found in confronting and addressing fears head-on. Story 9. It was a typical Tuesday evening, the kind where everything feels comfortably routine. I had spent the day at the office, followed by a brief stop at the grocery store, and returned home just as the sun began to set. The light fading on the horizon seemed to cast a warm glow over my house, masking the chill of the evening air. I was looking forward to a quiet night in, perhaps catching up on a book and enjoying a simple dinner. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something odd. The front door was slightly ajar. My heart skipped a beat. I always ensured the door was securely locked, so this sight was alarming. I approached cautiously, my senses on high alert. When I entered the house, the first thing I noticed was the lack of the usual reassuring beep of the security system. The silence was unnerving. I had set the alarm before leaving, and it should have been active. I checked the control panel near the entrance, but it was dark, unresponsive to my touch. My mind raced as I realized the implications. Someone had tampered with the system. I hurried to check the windows, starting with the ones in the living room. To my horror, I found that several of them had been forced open. The locks were broken, the frames damaged. It was clear that someone had entered my home without permission. I ran through the house, checking each room for signs of disturbance. Furniture was overturned in the living room, and drawers were pulled open. The kitchen was a mess, with cabinets ajar and contents scattered on the floor. The back rooms, including my bedroom and the children's rooms, showed signs of a disturbing trail of disarray indicating that someone had been rifling through my personal belongings. The feeling of violation was overwhelming. I had always prided myself on being cautious, and yet here I was, facing the aftermath of someone invading my personal space. I immediately called the police, providing them with details of the situation. They assured me they would send officers over as soon as possible, but I had to wait for their arrival. In the interim, I took stock of what was missing or damaged. My jewelry box was rifled through, and some valuable items were gone. The safe in my office had been tampered with, though fortunately the valuables inside appeared untouched. I made a list of the missing items and any potential clues that might help the investigation. When the police arrived, they conducted a thorough examination of the scene. They took fingerprints and analyzed the broken windows and damaged security system. They also interviewed me about any potential suspects or recent unusual activity. The questions felt invasive, but I understood their necessity. I recounted recent events and interactions, trying to recall anything that might shed light on who could be responsible. The forensic team worked methodically, collecting evidence and taking photographs of the damage. They found traces of a specific type of tool used to disable the security system, one that required expertise to handle. This detail was both revealing and troubling, indicating that whoever did this had a high level of skill and knowledge. As days turned into weeks, the police investigation progressed slowly. They identified the type of tool used and matched it to a few known burglars, but none of the suspects had a clear motive or connection to me. Surveillance footage from nearby cameras offered little help. The perpetrator had been careful to avoid areas covered by cameras and had worn gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. The breach left me with an unsettling sense of vulnerability. I took immediate steps to reinforce my home's security. I replaced the damaged windows with reinforced glass and had a new, more advanced security system installed, complete with cameras and motion sensors. The new system was monitored 24/7, giving me some peace of mind, though the trauma of the invasion lingered. I also took precautions to avoid similar incidents in the future. I changed all the locks in the house and made sure to maintain a heightened level of awareness about my surroundings. I enrolled in a neighborhood watch program and participated in local community meetings to stay informed about any suspicious activity. Despite these efforts, the feeling of violation persisted. I struggled to regain my sense of normalcy. Simple things like leaving the house for a few hours or going to bed at night now came with a layer of anxiety. I found myself checking locks multiple times and feeling uneasy whenever I was away from home. Months later, the police made a breakthrough. They identified a suspect with a history of burglaries who had used similar tools and methods. The suspect was apprehended, and during interrogation, they confessed to multiple break-ins, including mine. It was a relief to know that justice might be served, but the psychological scars remained.
The experience had a profound impact on my life. It taught me the importance of vigilance and the need to invest in robust security measures. It also reminded me of the fragility of personal safety and the need to be proactive in protecting one's home and family.
In the end, while the physical damage was repaired and the perpetrator was held accountable, the emotional impact of the breach took longer to heal. I learned to live with the lingering unease, but found solace in the support of my family and the strength and security of my home. The ordeal served as a stark reminder of the importance of safeguarding one's personal space and the resilience required to overcome such violations. Story 10. The message pinged on my phone as I was scrolling through my favorite streaming service. The text was from an unknown number and read, "I see you're finally home. Nice decor, especially like the artwork in the living room." My heart skipped a beat. I was alone, and the idea that someone could see into my private space was unsettling. I tried to brush it off as a wrong number or a prank, but when I looked at the message again, the description was too specific to ignore. The mention of my artwork was something only someone who had been inside my home would know. I hesitated before responding, thinking it might only encourage whoever was behind the messages. Instead, I decided to ignore the text and continue with my evening. But then, another message arrived, this time detailing the contents of my kitchen. I noticed you've been trying to fix that leaky faucet. Did you get it sorted? The information was too accurate, too intrusive. I felt a creeping sense of dread as I realized this person had been watching me closely. I decided to call the police, but before I could make the call, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message included a picture of my home from the street outside, taken through my living room window. The caption read, "I'm just getting started. Let's see how long you can keep this up." Fear set in, and I dialed 911. The dispatcher took my report seriously and assured me they would send an officer to my house immediately. While waiting, I felt like a prisoner in my own home. I checked every room, locked all the doors, and turned on all the lights. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was lurking outside, watching my every move. When the officer arrived, I showed them the messages and the photograph. They conducted a quick search of the area around my home but found no signs of anyone suspicious. The officer took a report and promised to increase patrols around my neighborhood. I was left feeling both relieved and even more anxious. The immediate threat had been addressed, but the psychological impact lingered. Over the next few days, the texts continued. They grew increasingly detailed, with the sender describing my daily routines, the books on my shelves, and even the type of coffee I preferred. The constant barrage of information made me feel as if I were under constant surveillance. The messages seemed to come at random times, often when I was alone, further amplifying my anxiety. One message read, "I noticed you're working late tonight. Don't stay up too late, wouldn't want anything to happen." What we had included a photo of my parked car outside my office building. The feeling of being watched was suffocating. I decided to take further precautions. I hired a private investigator to help uncover the identity of the person behind the texts. The investigator set up surveillance and began looking into any potential suspects or patterns that might lead to the perpetrator. Meanwhile, I continued to document every message, including the times they were sent and the content. A week into the investigation, the private investigator uncovered something alarming. The texts seemed to be coming from a number that was registered to a company specializing in home security systems. This company had been involved in installing equipment in several homes, including mine. It was possible that someone with access to this company's database was using their position to track and intimidate clients. Feeling more uneasy than ever, I contacted the company and expressed my concerns. They conducted their own internal investigation and discovered that a former employee, who had been fired under suspicious circumstances, had accessed client information and was potentially using it for personal gain. They cooperated with the police and provided evidence of the former employee's misconduct. The police acted swiftly, and the former employee was tracked down and questioned. It turned out that this person had been using their insider knowledge to target clients, gaining access to their homes and personal information to carry out their threats. The investigation revealed that they had been using a combination of public information and insider access to monitor and harass clients. The former employee was arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including stalking and harassment. The police assured me that they would continue to monitor the situation to ensure there were no further threats. In the aftermath of the ordeal, I made significant changes to how I handled personal security. I revamped my home security system, implemented stricter privacy settings on all my accounts, and became more vigilant about who had access to my personal information. The experience served as a harsh lesson in the importance of safeguarding one's privacy and being cautious about who handles sensitive information. The psychological impact of the experience lingered. I had to work through feelings of violation and fear, which were exacerbated by the constant reminder of being watched. Therapy helped me process the trauma and regain a sense of normalcy. While the ordeal was unsettling and invasive, it also strengthened my resolve to protect my privacy and advocate for better security measures. The experience underscored the importance of being vigilant and proactive in safeguarding one's personal space against those who would seek to violate it. Story 11. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when I decided to indulge in a rare moment of self-care. After a hectic week, I was looking forward to a relaxing bath. I lit some candles, filled the tub with warm water, and sank into the soothing heat, feeling the stress of the week slowly melt away. The rain pattering against the window created a calming backdrop, and I thought to myself how peaceful and safe I felt in my own home. As I closed my eyes and let myself unwind, a sudden, uneasy thought crossed my mind. I had recently heard about a rise in home invasions and other privacy breaches. I pushed the thought aside, reminding myself that I had taken all the necessary precautions to keep my home secure. I continued to relax, letting the soothing bubbles of the bath wash away my worries. When I finally stepped out of the tub, I wrapped myself in a towel and went to the bathroom mirror to dry my hair. As I reached for a towel on the rack, I noticed something odd. There was a small, inconspicuous object tucked behind the towel. It was partially hidden, with just a tiny lens peeking out. My heart skipped a beat as I realized it was a camera. My hands trembled as I pulled the object into the light. It was a compact, high-definition camera with a sleek, black design. My mind raced with disbelief and fear. How had this camera ended up in my bathroom? I quickly assessed the situation and realized that someone had been watching me while I thought I was safe at home. Panicked, I grabbed my phone and called the police, my voice trembling as I explained the situation. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher while I took pictures of the camera and its hiding spot. My mind was a whirlwind of anxiety and disbelief. How long had the camera been there? Had anyone been watching me? The thought was chilling. The police arrived within minutes, and I showed them the camera and the location where I had found it. Officer Ramirez, a seasoned detective with a calm demeanor, carefully examined the camera. He asked me a series of questions about any recent incidents or unusual activity. I could hardly remember anything out of the ordinary, except for a vague sense of being watched, but I hadn't thought much of it. The officer took the camera into evidence, assuring me that they would analyze it for fingerprints and other traces of the intruder. They also promised to investigate any possible connections to recent incidents in the area. I was left feeling a mix of relief and apprehension as they conducted a thorough sweep of the house to ensure there were no other hidden cameras or signs of intrusion. After the police left, I found it hard to relax. My mind kept replaying the unsettling discovery and the implications of having my privacy so thoroughly violated. I felt a profound sense of betrayal and fear. My home, once a sanctuary, had become a place where my safety was compromised. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and vigilance. I increased the security measures around my home, installing additional locks and a surveillance system. I also took precautions to avoid any potential further breaches, such as avoiding sharing personal information and being cautious about strangers. I felt on edge, unable to fully trust the safety of my environment. A week later, I received a call from Officer Ramirez. The police had conducted a thorough investigation and traced the camera back to a known offender. The individual, a local technician who had been employed to perform maintenance work on the building a few months earlier, had a history of privacy violations. It turned out that he had used his access to install hidden cameras in several homes, preying on unsuspecting residents. The revelation was both a relief and a shock. The fact that the offender had been identified and apprehended provided a sense of closure, but the realization that someone had so easily exploited my trust was deeply unsettling. The police assured me that all the footage had been deleted and that there was no evidence of any wrongdoing beyond the invasion of privacy. Despite the resolution, the experience left a lasting impact. I found it difficult to shake off the sense of violation and distrust. My home, once a place of comfort, now felt like a constant reminder of the breach. I continued to take measures to secure my privacy, including regular checks for potential hidden devices and increased awareness of who had access to my home. I also became more involved in raising awareness about privacy issues. I shared my story with friends, family, and through local community groups, emphasizing the importance of safeguarding one's home and being vigilant about privacy. The experience had taught me the critical need for vigilance in a world where privacy can so easily be compromised. In time, I learned to reclaim my sense of security. I adjusted my routines and habits, taking extra precautions without letting fear dominate my life. I found solace in knowing that the offender was no longer a threat and that I had taken proactive steps to protect myself. The memory of discovering the hidden camera remained a reminder of the vulnerability of privacy in modern life, but it also became a catalyst for change in how I approached personal security. It reinforced the importance of vigilance, both in protecting oneself and in fostering a community that is aware and proactive about safeguarding privacy. Story 12. It was a chilly winter evening when I returned home from work, looking forward to a quiet night in. The day had been long and stressful, and I was eager to unwind. As I approached my house, I noticed something strange. A window on the ground floor was slightly open. My heart raced with unease, but I pushed the thought aside, convincing myself it must have been a simple oversight. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the unsettling reality hit me like a cold wave. The living room was in disarray. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out, and personal items were scattered across the floor. Panic surged through me as I realized that my home had been broken into. I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay calm. The first priority was to ensure my safety. I quickly backed out of the house and called the police, providing them with the details of the break-in. They assured me that officers would be dispatched immediately. As I waited outside, my mind raced through the possibilities. Who could have done this? What were they looking for? I was filled with a mix of fear, anger, and helplessness. I looked around at my neighbors, hoping someone might have seen something unusual, but it seemed like the area was eerily quiet. When the police arrived, they began to investigate. They carefully examined the scene, taking photographs and collecting evidence. One of the officers, a seasoned detective named Officer Miller, approached me with a solemn expression. "We'll need to process the entire house for fingerprints and other evidence," Officer Miller explained. "In the meantime, you should avoid touching anything." I nodded, trying to steady my nerves. The officer's calm demeanor was reassuring, but the thought of an intruder being in my home was deeply unsettling. As the police continued their investigation, I decided to take a closer look at the damage. My heart pounded with each step as I moved through the house, surveying the chaos. Everything seemed to be in disarray, though what caught my eye was something on the kitchen fridge. Taped to the fridge door was a note. The words were scrawled in dark ink, and the handwriting was erratic. My hands shook as I approached the note and read it. "I know where you live. You can't hide from me. Watch your back. This is just the beginning." The message sent a chill down my spine. It was a clear threat, and it seemed to suggest that the break-in was only the start of something more sinister. I took a photograph of the note and handed it to Officer Miller, who examined it carefully. "This is concerning," Officer Miller said, frowning as he reviewed the message. "It's definitely a threat. We'll need to take this seriously and investigate further. In the meantime, make sure you're taking extra precautions. Change your locks and consider installing additional security measures." I nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. The officer's advice made sense, but the reality of being targeted left me feeling vulnerable and scared. I was grateful for the police's support, but couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Once the police had finished their initial investigation, I was left alone in the house, surrounded by the remnants of the break-in. I couldn't stay there alone. I called a friend, Emily, and asked if I could stay with her for the night. She was understanding and immediately offered me a place to stay. I spent the night at Emily's house, trying to distract myself from the fear and uncertainty. We talked about the break-in and brainstormed ways to improve my security. Emily's support was a comfort, but my mind kept returning to the note and the threat it contained. The following day, I took the police's advice seriously. I contacted a locksmith to change all the locks in my house and hired a security company to install a comprehensive alarm system with cameras. I also notified my neighbors about the break-in and asked them to keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. Despite these measures, the feeling of being watched lingered. I was on high alert and found it difficult to relax. Every noise in the night seemed amplified, and I was constantly checking the locks and security cameras. The sense of violation and fear lingered like a shadow over my daily life. As days turned into weeks, the police continued their investigation. They analyzed the fingerprints and evidence collected from the scene, but the trail seemed to grow cold. The note provided little information about the intruder's identity, and no further leads emerged. The break-in and the threatening note had left me with a profound sense of insecurity. I found solace in the support of friends and family, and I made a conscious effort to rebuild my sense of safety. I started attending self-defense classes and became more vigilant about my surroundings. Though the immediate threat seemed to diminish, the psychological impact remained. The break-in had been a stark reminder of the vulnerability that can come with personal safety, and it had changed how I viewed my home and my security. The message left on my fridge was a chilling reminder that sometimes the fear of the unknown can be as haunting as the crime itself. In time, I adjusted to the new normal, fortified by the measures I had taken to protect myself and my home. The experience had been terrifying, but it also strengthened my resolve to prioritize my safety and well-being. The ordeal taught me the importance of vigilance and the need to trust in both the support of loved ones and the effectiveness of preventive measures. Story 13. The discovery came on a late autumn afternoon, when the crisp air carried a sense of both change and unease. I had just finished rearranging some furniture in my home office, a task that had been overdue for weeks. Feeling a sense of accomplishment, I decided to take a break and head upstairs to relax in my bedroom. As I walked up the stairs, I noticed a strange, musty odor that seemed to be coming from the attic. I had never paid much attention to it before, dismissing it as the result of old insulation or dust buildup. But today the smell was stronger, more distinct, like the faint scent of something rotting mixed with a lingering, sickly sweetness. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate. I retrieved a flashlight from the utility closet and climbed the stairs to the attic. The door to the attic creaked as I opened it, revealing a space cluttered with old boxes, forgotten furniture, and an assortment of household items. As I shone the flashlight around, I noticed a few things out of place. A half-eaten sandwich lay discarded on an old trunk, and several food wrappers and empty cans were strewn about. My heart raced as I realized these items didn't belong to me. I had not been in the attic for months, and yet someone had clearly been living there. The sight of personal belongings scattered around was unsettling. Among the food wrappers, I found a worn-out notebook with scribbled notes and drawings. The notes were disjointed, mentioning observations of my daily routines and peculiar details about my life that only someone who had been closely monitoring me would know. The realization that someone had been intruding into my private space left me paralyzed with fear. I continued to search the attic, uncovering more evidence of an intruder. There was a pile of dirty clothes, a makeshift bed fashioned from old blankets and cushions, and even a few personal items, an old photograph, a small trinket, and a well-worn book with a name inscribed on the inside cover. The name matched neither mine nor anyone I recognized. Shaking with anxiety, I took photos of the evidence and descended the stairs to contact the police. I detailed the situation to Officer Harris, who responded promptly. When he arrived, he carefully examined the attic and the items I had found. He confirmed that the evidence suggested someone had been living there without my knowledge. The investigation began immediately. Officer Harris took the food wrappers, the notebook, and other personal items as evidence. He arranged for forensic analysis to identify any potential fingerprints or DNA that might provide clues about the intruder's identity. The process was agonizing. I felt as though my sanctuary had been violated in the most personal way imaginable. Every creak of the floorboards or sound outside my home became a source of fear. I avoided the attic entirely, unsure of what else might be hidden there. In the following days, the police conducted interviews with my neighbors and reviewed any nearby surveillance footage that might capture suspicious activity. They also increased patrols in my area, trying to provide some semblance of reassurance and security. As the investigation continued, I tried to piece together any clues that might explain how the intruder had gained access to my home. The attic door was secure, and there were no signs of forced entry. It became evident that the intruder had found a way to enter the house without leaving a trace, perhaps through an unsecured window or a hidden entry point. Weeks passed with no significant breakthroughs. The forensic analysis did not yield any definitive results, and the surveillance footage did not capture any clear evidence. The intruder's identity remained a mystery, and the sense of vulnerability persisted. Despite the police efforts, the experience left me feeling deeply unsettled. I found myself questioning everything about my home and the security measures I had previously taken for granted. I became hyper-aware of every noise and every unfamiliar sight, and I took extra precautions to ensure my safety. I decided to invest in a comprehensive security system, including motion detectors, cameras, and reinforced locks on all windows and doors. I also had a professional security service inspect my home for any potential vulnerabilities and make recommendations for improvement. One night, as I was reviewing the security camera footage, I noticed something unsettling. A shadowy figure had been lingering near the edge of my property on several occasions. The figure appeared to be watching the house, occasionally approaching the attic window before retreating into the darkness. The footage was too grainy to provide a clear image, but the behavior was alarming. I shared the footage with Officer Harris, who took it seriously. The police increased their surveillance efforts and attempted to identify the figure, but the investigation continued to yield limited results. The months following the intrusion were a challenging period of adjustment. I struggled to regain a sense of normalcy and security, but the impact of the invasion lingered. I was constantly on edge, fearful that someone might be watching me or planning another intrusion. In the end, the mystery of the intruder remained unresolved. The investigation provided some insights, but ultimately did not lead to a concrete identification of the perpetrator. Despite this, I took comfort in the increased security measures I had implemented and the support of friends and family who helped me navigate the aftermath. The experience served as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance and the need to protect one's personal space. While the sense of violation never fully disappeared, I found strength in the knowledge that I had taken every possible measure to safeguard my home and restore a semblance of security to my life. Story 14. The discovery came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, a day that began like any other. I had been running errands and attending meetings, and by the time I got home, I was looking forward to a quiet evening. As I parked my car in the driveway and started unloading groceries, I noticed something peculiar, a small, metallic object stuck to the underside of my car. Curiosity got the better of me, and I reached for the object. It was a small, rectangular device, attached with a piece of tape. My first thought was that it might be some sort of misplaced gadget or piece of trash. However, as I examined it more closely, I realized it had a sleek, professional appearance, unlike anything I had seen before. My heart raced as I carefully removed the device and brought it inside. I knew I needed to find out what it was, so I Googled its appearance and quickly discovered that it was a GPS tracker. The realization hit me like a cold wave. Someone had been tracking my movements. Panic set in as I thought about how long the tracker might have been there. Had someone been watching me all this time? I felt a rush of fear and anxiety. The sense of violation was overwhelming, and I struggled to remain calm. I immediately contacted the police and reported the discovery. When the officers arrived, they took the GPS tracker for analysis. They reassured me that they would investigate the matter thoroughly, but I could sense their skepticism about finding the person responsible. They explained that GPS trackers were often used for various reasons, from tracking stolen vehicles to monitoring people without their consent. The latter was far more concerning in my case. While waiting for the police to provide more information, I took steps to ensure my safety. I changed my daily routines, took different routes, and avoided predictable patterns. The thought of someone knowing my every move was deeply unsettling, and I felt like I was constantly being watched. The next few days were filled with an almost paralyzing anxiety. I avoided driving my car whenever possible, using public transportation and ride shares instead. I also checked my car thoroughly before each use, inspecting every nook and cranny to make sure there were no additional trackers or tampering. The police investigation revealed that the GPS tracker had been in place for at least a week, but they were unable to identify who had planted it. The device had no unique identifiers or serial numbers that could be traced back to the purchaser. They advised me to keep monitoring my surroundings and to report any suspicious activity. As the days went by, I received a strange message on my phone. It was a short, anonymous text that read, "Hope you're enjoying your detours. See you soon." The message sent a shiver down my spine. Whoever had placed the tracker seemed to be taunting me, playing a cruel game of cat and mouse. I immediately reported the message to the police, who advised me to be cautious and to document any further communications. I started to feel like I was living in a constant state of vigilance. Every time I saw a car parked nearby for an extended period or noticed someone paying too much attention to me, I felt a jolt of fear. I began to question the intentions of everyone around me and wondered if I could trust anyone. In an attempt to regain some control over the situation, I took additional measures to protect myself. I installed a new security system in my home, including cameras and motion sensors. I also sought advice from a security consultant to improve my overall personal safety and privacy. Despite these efforts, the sense of being watched never fully dissipated. The anonymous messages continued intermittently, each one more cryptic and menacing than the last. The police were able to trace some of the messages to a burner phone, but the trail went cold when the phone was discarded. Weeks turned into months, and the trail of the GPS tracker grew colder. The police investigation was still ongoing, but there were no new leads or developments. The tracker had been removed, but the psychological impact of the experience lingered. I found solace in speaking with a therapist about the trauma and anxiety that had resulted from the ordeal. The therapy sessions helped me process my feelings of violation and fear and provided me with coping strategies to manage my anxiety. I learned to focus on what I could control and to let go of the things that were beyond my reach. The experience also led me to reassess my privacy and security measures. I became more proactive in protecting my personal information and ensuring that my home and vehicles were secure. I also became more vigilant about my surroundings and more cautious in my daily routines. While the GPS tracker incident was a harrowing experience, it ultimately taught me valuable lessons about personal security and resilience. The violation of my privacy was deeply unsettling, but it also galvanized me to take charge of my safety and to advocate for greater awareness of privacy issues. In the end, the ordeal served as a reminder of the importance of remaining vigilant and taking proactive steps to protect oneself in an increasingly connected world. Although the fear and anxiety from the experience never fully disappeared, I learned to live with a greater sense of awareness and control, and to cherish the moments of normalcy and safety that I had worked so hard to regain. Story 15. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the world feels comfortably predictable. I had just wrapped up a long day at work and was eager to unwind at home. I parked my car in the driveway, grabbed my bag, and unlocked the front door, ready to sink into the familiar comfort of my living space. As I stepped inside, the usual quiet of my home greeted me. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag on the floor, and headed toward the kitchen to grab a snack. The day had been exhausting, and the thought of a cozy meal was a comforting end to a hectic day. But as I approached the kitchen, I froze. There was a man standing in the middle of the room, rifling through the drawers and cupboards. His back was turned to me, and he was moving with a deliberate slowness, almost as if he was trying to avoid making any sudden noises. The sight of him, dressed in a disheveled coat and jeans, was both confusing and alarming. My heart raced. I cleared my throat, trying to make my presence known without startling him. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Can I help you?" The man turned slowly, his face a mask of feigned surprise. His eyes darted around as if searching for an excuse. "Oh, hi there," he said, with an awkward chuckle. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize anyone was home. I'm just looking for something." I took a step back, my mind racing. looking for what I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is my house." The man's smile faltered, and he shifted uncomfortably. I was just, looking for something I lost. I thought I might have left it here." I was immediately on guard. His story didn't add up. There was something off about his demeanor, and his response seemed rehearsed, as if he had prepared it on the spot. I took another step back and reached for my phone, intending to call the police. The man noticed my movement and his eyes widened slightly. Wait, he said, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. "I really don't want any trouble. I just thought I might have accidentally come into the wrong house." "That doesn't explain why you're rummaging through my things," I replied, my voice firmer now. "I need you to leave. I'm calling the police." The man's eyes darted around the room as if weighing his options. He seemed to realize that his cover was blown. All right, I'm going," he said hastily. He turned and made a beeline for the door, his steps quick and uneven. I immediately dialed 911, providing the dispatcher with a description of the intruder and the events that had transpired. While I waited for the police to arrive, I tried to calm my racing heart and regain my composure. I moved through the house, checking to see if anything was out of place or missing. The kitchen, though disheveled, seemed to have been untouched apart from the disturbance caused by the man's rummaging. When the police arrived, I recounted the incident in detail, describing the man's appearance and his suspicious behavior. The officers conducted a quick search of the area but found no sign of the intruder. They took note of the description and assured me that they would keep an eye out for anyone matching it. They also advised me to secure my home and be vigilant. As the officers left, I couldn't shake the feeling of violation. The man's casual intrusion into my personal space had left me rattled. I took extra precautions that evening, checking all the locks and setting up additional security measures. The incident had heightened my sense of vulnerability, and I felt an unsettling sense of unease that lingered long after the police had departed. The days following the intrusion were marked by a constant state of alert. I invested in a home security system, including cameras and motion detectors, to provide a sense of security and peace of mind. I also reached out to neighbors, informing them of the incident and encouraging them to be aware of any unusual activity in the area. Despite these measures, the intrusion had left a lasting impact. The sense of safety that once accompanied the familiarity of my home had been compromised. I became hyper-aware of every sound and movement, constantly on edge and wary of any signs of intrusion. Over time, I managed to regain a semblance of normalcy, but the memory of that day remained a stark reminder of the potential dangers that lurk even in the most familiar of places. The experience reinforced my awareness of the importance of home security and the need to trust my instincts when something feels off. Though the man was never identified or apprehended, I took solace in the fact that I had taken proactive steps to protect myself and my home. The intrusion had been a jarring lesson in the realities of modern living, highlighting the importance of vigilance and preparedness in safeguarding personal space. The incident served as a constant reminder to stay alert and take proactive measures to ensure one's safety. It was a painful but valuable lesson in the importance of home security and the need to trust one's instincts when faced with unsettling situations. Story 16. It was an ordinary evening when the intrusion began, a night like any other. I was alone at home, savoring a rare evening of relaxation after a long week at work. The sky outside was a deep indigo, and the gentle hum of the city seemed a world away as I settled into my favorite armchair. My smart home system, which I had meticulously set up for convenience and security, was functioning perfectly, or so I thought. The system was the latest in home automation technology, equipped with smart lights, cameras, and an integrated security system. I had chosen it for its reputation for reliability and ease of use. With just a few taps on my phone, I could control the lighting, monitor the security cameras, and adjust the thermostat. It was designed to make my life easier and provide peace of mind. That evening, I was engrossed in a movie, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of the floor lamp and a few strategically placed light fixtures. Suddenly, without warning, the lights flickered and then turned off completely. The abrupt darkness was startling, and I fumbled for my phone to turn them back on. When the lights finally came back on, they were at an intensity that was far brighter than usual, casting harsh shadows across the room. Confused, I checked the smart home app on my phone. Everything seemed normal, no notifications, no alarms, no errors. I adjusted the lights back to a comfortable level, assuming it was just a minor glitch. As I returned to my movie, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Minutes later, the situation took a darker turn. I heard a strange noise coming from the security camera feed on my phone. The cameras, which I had positioned around the house for security, were live streaming footage of empty rooms. I clicked through the feeds, trying to see what might be causing the disturbance. To my horror, I noticed that the camera angles were shifting, as if someone were manually adjusting them. A chill ran down my spine. I had installed these cameras with the expectation of viewing them from my phone, not of someone else manipulating them. My heart raced as I tried to regain control. I attempted to turn the cameras off, but they remained unresponsive. Just then, the lights in the hallway flickered and then began to flash in a strobe-like pattern. Panic set in as I realized that someone was remotely controlling my smart home system. I rushed to the control panel mounted on the wall and attempted to override the system manually, but it seemed that my access was being blocked. Frantically, I called the security company's customer support. As I waited for an answer, I tried to piece together what was happening. My mind raced with questions: who could be doing this, and why? The thought that someone was watching me through my own security cameras and manipulating my home's lights was deeply unsettling. The support representative eventually answered and listened to my frantic explanation. They reassured me that they would investigate immediately. They guided me through a series of steps to disconnect the system from the internet and secure my account. They also advised me to check for any suspicious activity or unauthorized access attempts. As I followed their instructions, the lights continued to flicker erratically, and the camera feeds remained out of my control. I was left with a growing sense of vulnerability, knowing that my home, which I had intended to be a sanctuary, was now a target for an unknown intruder. The security company technician arrived within the hour and took over the situation. He meticulously examined the smart home system, checking for signs of hacking or unauthorized access. He discovered that my system had been breached through a vulnerability in the software, which allowed hackers to gain control over the network and manipulate the devices. The technician worked quickly to isolate the issue and restore control of the system. Meanwhile, I was left feeling exposed and anxious. The sense of violation was profound, knowing that someone had been able to infiltrate my home security system and invade my privacy. After several hours, the technician successfully secured the system and conducted a thorough check to ensure there were no lingering threats. He also recommended that I update all my passwords, enable two-factor authentication, and review my home security protocols. He assured me that the breach had been contained, but advised me to remain vigilant for any signs of further issues. The aftermath of the intrusion left me with a heightened sense of caution and anxiety. I realized that while smart home systems offer convenience and control, they also come with risks that require careful management. The experience served as a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities associated with interconnected technology and the importance of maintaining robust security practices. In the weeks that followed, I took steps to fortify my home security. I upgraded my smart home system with enhanced security features, replaced outdated components, and implemented additional layers of protection. I also engaged with a cybersecurity consultant to review my overall digital security and ensure that my personal information was safeguarded. The intrusion had shaken my sense of security, but it also highlighted the need to stay informed and proactive in protecting oneself against potential threats. I learned to approach technology with a balanced perspective, embracing its benefits while remaining vigilant against its risks. Despite the unsettling experience, I worked to reclaim my sense of safety and control, understanding that vigilance and preparedness were key to navigating the complex landscape of modern technology. Story 17. It was a routine Monday morning, and I was starting my work week with the usual cup of coffee and a quick glance at my emails. My phone buzzed with a new voicemail, and as I was running late, I almost ignored it. However, something about the anonymous number caught my attention. I hit play, expecting a telemarketer or perhaps a wrong number. The voicemail began with a series of muffled noises, as if the caller was adjusting the phone or covering the microphone. Then, a calm, unsettling voice came through. "Good morning, Emily. I see you're just getting up. You have a busy day ahead. I noticed you leave for work at 8:15 every morning. Don't forget to pick up your dry cleaning later. I'll be watching." My heart raced as I listened to the message again, trying to make sense of it. The voice was smooth but carried an eerie undertone, and the details about my daily schedule were accurate. They knew when I left for work, my routine stops, and even mentioned specific plans that I had made for the day. The message was intrusive and deeply unsettling. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread and convinced myself it was a prank. I called the number back, but it was disconnected. I reviewed the voicemail, searching for any clues about the caller's identity, but there were none. The lack of concrete information left me with a gnawing sense of fear. The rest of the day at work was a blur. I couldn't focus on my tasks, my mind drifting back to the voicemail. I found myself glancing over my shoulder, paranoid about every passerby. I shared the voicemail with a trusted colleague, Sarah, who advised me to contact the police. Her reaction was alarmed and sympathetic, and she helped me report the call to local authorities. The police were receptive to my concerns and took the voicemail as evidence. They assured me they would investigate, but explained that anonymous calls could be difficult to trace. In the meantime, they advised me to be cautious and to increase my personal security measures. They suggested installing a home security system and keeping my doors and windows locked. Despite their advice, the sense of being watched was overwhelming. I installed the security system immediately, setting up cameras around my house and activating motion detectors. I also began varying my routine, taking different routes to work and running errands at different times, hoping to thwart any potential surveillance. As the days passed, the anxiety became a constant companion. I found myself scrutinizing every movement, every unfamiliar car parked near my house. I started carrying pepper spray and keeping my phone charged and within reach at all times. The fear that someone might be watching me took a toll on my mental and emotional well-being. 2 weeks after receiving the voicemail, I got another unsettling call. This time it wasn't a voicemail but a live call. I answered with a trembling voice, and the same calm, disturbing voice spoke through the receiver. "Emily, I see you're still on edge. I suppose you're wondering if I'm really watching you. Rest assured I am." I ended the call abruptly, my hands shaking. I reported the call to the police, providing them with the new information. They intensified their efforts, monitoring my area and checking for any suspicious activity. However, the anonymity of the calls made it challenging to track down the source. In the following days, I noticed subtle changes in my surroundings that heightened my anxiety. My front porch light, which I had set to turn on automatically, seemed to flicker more frequently. My neighbors began to avoid eye contact, and some seemed to glance curiously at my house. I couldn't tell if it was my paranoia or if something genuinely unsettling was happening. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room with the security cameras recording, I heard a knock at the door. My heart raced as I approached, peering through the peephole. There was no one in sight, but when I opened the door, I found a small package on the doorstep. My name was written on it in the same unsettling handwriting as the previous voicemail notes. Inside the package was a small digital recorder and a note. The note read, "Just in case you're doubting my sincerity. I'm always close by." I felt a chill run down my spine as I examined the recorder. It was already playing a recording my own voice from an earlier conversation with a friend. The recording was edited to include snippets of my daily conversations, suggesting that someone had been listening to me. I immediately contacted the police, providing them with the package and the recorder. They took the items for further analysis, hoping to find any evidence that could help identify the caller. They increased their patrols in the area, and suggested that I keep a low profile while the investigation continued.